All right, great. I'm gonna actually introduce things now. So, thanks everybody for being here. As you know, this is our fireside chat. We've got Fredric Mitchell, who's the owner principal of Bright Plum. He's local to Chicago. He's going to be doing this interview with Dries. And we've got Dries here, the project lead and founder of Drupal something in Acquia now too, right? CTO,
Yeah. Executive chair.
executive chair. There we go.
Yeah.
Yes. With that, I'll leave it to Fredric and let these guys go.
I need your other microphone.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, by the way. I'm excited to be here. So, yeah. And it's also great to see many familiar faces. The people that I haven't seen in a long time and people I've seen recently as well, but it's really nice.
All right. Well, thanks again, as Avi said. Welcome to the Dries Fireside Chat at Midcamp. My name is Fredric Mitchell. I've been part of Drupal for, checked my notes, 17 and a half years, apparently. It's a very long time. I've worn pretty much all the hats. I've worked for a lot of agencies, university, etc. And now I'm a small agency owner, so I'm really excited to talk to Dries. And just to give you a little background on what we're going to talk about, we're really going to focus on community. We're going to ask a lot of questions related to the community, follow up for DrupalCon, etc., things of that nature. But first, I personally want to thank Dries. I was introduced to Drupal, as I mentioned, almost 18 years ago. Never heard of it. Self-taught developer, worked at an agency, introduced Drupal, and Drupal has allowed me to feed my family. It's helped me meet a lot of different people. So, I haven't met you before, so this is my first time in person being able to say directly to you, thank you for creating the project and thank you for creating the things that we've been able to do. That's not a small thing, so thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that. And every time people do, it feels very nice. It also honestly feels a bit awkward because I feel like I created Drupal for myself and then all of a sudden it took off. And in many ways, I've always felt like an accidental leader for the project, like not intentional. And also, like, obviously it's the work of many people. Like, I started it, but Drupal is what it is today because thousands of people have contributed to it over the many years. So as a project lead or the founder, I should say, you get a lot of thank yous, but really thank all of you for helping to make Drupal what it is.
Absolutely. So, yeah. Absolutely. All right, so let's dive into it. So, one of the things that's interesting, and for those who are new to the Drupal community, as we're alluding to, Drupal has grown tremendously. One of the things that's grown within Drupal is Dries' company, Acquia. So I want to first sort of ask you, maybe talk a little bit about, what a typical day like is for you, what you're doing at Acquia nowadays, and really what you feel like your role is in the Drupal community at this stage.
Yeah, sure. So, well, first of all, I started Acquia almost 18 years ago, and the goal was to help Drupal grow. That's why I started Acquia. And for the last 17, 18 years, I've been the chief technology officer. I was running product and engineering teams and operations team, architecture teams, even ran product marketing, so part of the marketing function for some time as well. And at the beginning of this year, I changed my role.
Okay.
And so I gave up my operational responsibilities. All these teams that I mentioned was hundreds of people. And I only have one person now reporting to me.
Okay.
And so with that, I evolved from being the chief technology officer to the executive chair.
Got it.
And so I still am at Acquia. I didn't leave Acquia, but I don't have sort of a day-to-day teams to run, which has been really nice. And it actually has allowed me to spend more time on Drupal.
Awesome.
And so about, I would say, a year ago, maybe a little bit longer now, I decided that what the most impactful thing I can do right now is to maybe focus less on Acquia and focus more on Drupal, which is then led to Starshot and Drupal CMS and some of the, I like to say acceleration that we've seen from that. And so that was like a conscious choice.
Got it.
Because I felt like Drupal needed my attention more, and I wanted to make that change. And that was the full transparency combined with me wanting to spend more time with my family as well. Like when you do a startup like Acquia and when you run a Drupal project as well, like your family and your friends, they they sacrifice quite a bit. And so my kids are now at a stage where they're about to leave the house in the next year or next couple of years, and I
Congrats to
felt
you
like,
on that. I'm in that stage as well. I know
Yeah.
how hard that can be.
and I'm like, now is the time to spend a little bit more time with them, and now is the time to double down on Drupal. And so I made these changes very, intentional, I would say.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
my day-to-day at Acquia or my day-to-day at Drupal, I can quickly.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, at Acquia, I'm still involved. I'm on the board. I still talk to our top executives. I have one-on-ones with them. I help with strategy, help with M&A. So, mergers and acquisitions, buying companies. So it's a little bit of everything. I help with our customers. I like talking to our customers, those kinds of things. And then on the Drupal side, I've spent more of my time on the Drupal side. I've been really leading the Starshot initiative, the Drupal CMS initiative, and we've been working on recipes and project browser and AI. So for example, right now we're spending a lot of time on the AI strategy. And so we're going to be announcing in the next few weeks kind of an extended Drupal AI strategy. And that's been something that we've been working on for the last couple months, actually. We're doing work with the Drupal core team as well, trying to evolve the governance of Drupal core and getting more people on the Drupal core team as well. Some of these things are not very visible. I'm helping the Drupal Association. I'm on the board of the Drupal Association. I helped start the Drupal Association. So we're really trying to up the marketing and the innovation through the Drupal Association as well. So probably spend a little bit of time on that every day as well. So it's a little bit of everything, which is what keeps it interesting.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think that definitely transitions into kind of the next theme that I'd love for you to touch on is, sometimes when we talk about Drupal, we sort of interchange the framework and the community. So when we say Drupal, sometimes depending on the context, like, are you talking about code? Are you talking about, features? Are we actually talking about the people, the community, etc.? So I want to kind of lean a little bit on the community side. Maybe talk a little bit about your assessment of the community. Who do you think the community is? And what are the current from a people community perspective?
Yeah. Well, I think of our community as an awesome community, honestly, global, which I love. The fact that we have people all around the world. I think we're a skilled community. There's a lot of really talented people in our community across sort of the spectrum, from engineering to marketing to documentation to all of these things. I love the values that we have. I really do, like collaboration and openness.
Right.
This notion of not, we're competing sometimes, but we're kind of focused on collaboration, and so these are some of the things that I really love and that I'm very proud of, actually, of what we have built together. I think the challenges that we have are kind of the challenges that we've had for a long time. Like, how do we make our community more inclusive? How do we improve diversity within our community? How do we improve the accessibility of our community so people can join more easily and more people join? I worry about sustainability of our community as well. How do we keep going, and how do we make sure that all of the important things that need to happen can actually happen? So I spent quite a bit of my time thinking about that and working on that with the Drupal Association. So the challenges, I would say, are more, I don't know if operational is the word.
Okay.
Like, I love our values and what we stand for.
Right.
But the challenges are more like sort of, like keeping it going.
Right, the sustainability piece, right. So maybe we can dive a little bit deeper into that part. If you were to wave a magic wand, I know Drupal's 20 years old, and I'm, again, this is all subjective, but 10 years from now, like, what is your ideal version of what the community looks like? What are the kind of things that we're doing, or what does the world look like, if we're doing, like you said, the sustainable things that we're trying to figure out now? What are your thoughts on what that world looks like?
Yeah, it's a hard question. So first of all, I would love for the things that I love to stay the same, right? Our values, our openness, our collaboration, like, these things need to stay the same in 10 years. But what we need to solve, I think, is some of the things that I mentioned. So I would love in 10 years if our community was more accessible. A world where we've invited many new people into our community from across the world, from different genders and nationalities and backgrounds, all of these things. So that's one. I would love for the Drupal community to be more accessible. I would love for the Drupal community to be more sustainable, and that's where things like the maker-takers thinking comes in. And I would love for the community to be honest, more ambitious, even more ambitious than we are today. We're trying to do that with Drupal CMS right now, with Starshot, like try to be a little bit more, aggressive, I guess. I don't like that word, but like a little bit more ambitious. And I think that's good. And I'd love for that to kind of, like the whole community to take on that kind of, these ideas that we have. Like, I haven't really talked much about this, but maybe just in like 30 seconds, like one of the things we did within the Drupal CMS team, so we created this leadership team, and we actually started by defining our behaviors, so like one of the behaviors that we set is like, we want to move fast, we want to go fast. And then we actually defined sort of anti-patterns for each of these behaviors, basically examples of things that we don't want to do as a team within our leadership team. So like one example would be, we want to move fast, and the anti-pattern would be, we don't want to bike shed something for 2 months, right? Like we want to make a decision in days or hours versus weeks or months. And so those principles that we defined for ourselves, we haven't really communicated with the rest of the community. Like we've been testing them with ourselves, and with some of the track leads maybe too. But I don't know, I'd love for some of these things to kind of grow out of the leadership team right now to the rest of the community.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, because what I'm hearing is that some of the stuff that you all are doing at the leadership, is applicable to how the community can, be involved and engaged. There's some frameworks there that potentially we can sort of borrow. And I think I guess kind of leads to the next question is, when you think about, let's just kind of focus on Drupal CMS for a second. Again, for those who are new to this conversation, and the announcement of Drupal CMS and the efforts being done, can you connect it directly to how you're envisioning that benefits the community? I'm sure it makes sense. I just want to we're a lot of developers in here, so just kind of literally saying it goes to this and this and that, connecting how these initiatives are like, okay, and this is how it's going to help the community. Because I think, to your point, we contribute, right? And we, like you said, Drupal is a product of a lot of different people. As the team is moving fast, as association, as you get more involved, all the things that you mentioned, where do you see that really benefiting towards that long-term sustainability, specifically Drupal CMS and the AI stuff?
Yeah, well, I can talk about this for hours, but maybe I'll start with the simplest way. The simplest explanation I can give, which is everything that we do in Drupal CMS has been about growth. That's like the simplest way to think about it. Like recipes, experience builder, AI, some of the UX work, you name it. It's all about how do we grow Drupal and how do we grow it faster. Because one of the beliefs that I have is, like, open source communities are awesome. We talked about that.
Right.
But everything starts or stops, in my opinion, with having a great product that people actually want to use and that people actually want to adopt. If you're a young person and you're looking to make a career choice, you want to be part of something that's modern, that's exciting, that's growing.
Okay.
That's what you're going to bet your career on. And so a lot of what we've been focused on with Drupal CMS is growth. So we asked ourselves, where can we grow? Because we're already pretty dominant or established sort of in the enterprise. And we said there's 2 areas where we need to grow. Not only because we can grow there, but also because that's where the market is going. So it's, makes sense to grow there. And that is, one is to focus a little bit more on the mid-market, go down market basically. And 2 is on the marketer persona, the site builder, the content creators, the non-developers. Because developers already love Drupal, or many developers love Drupal, right? Not all of them.
That's all right.
That's
you
okay.
know who they are. They're in this room. It's all good. We've been here for a long time.
Loves Drupal. Yeah. And so we basically started with, like, how do we grow? Where can we grow? And that's really what Drupal CMS has been all about. And so we've been making Drupal easier to use for smaller organizations and for people that are not developers. But we've been doing this without abandoning all of the great things that we do for developers. Like, we haven't taken any technical subsystems out of Drupal. We haven't said, hey, we're going to dumb down this, whatever framework or module. Like we're keeping all of the technical flexibility and the technical power in Drupal. Like we're just adding a layer on top of it, if you will, or we're changing sort of the front end of Drupal to make it more accessible for many more people. And so I think it's really a best of both worlds kind of strategy.
Absolutely.
And so now we combine all the power and the security and the flexibility and the extensibility and the open sourciness of Drupal with a product that is more inviting and more exciting for more people to use in the world. And ultimately, I think that's going to benefit all of us, right? And maybe, like, there's maybe an elephant in the room, like where some of the agencies are like, well, I don't need Drupal CMS. Like it's not for my customers.
Right.
They're not those people that you just described. And that can be true, but we're also not taking anything away. And everything that we're doing, honestly, or almost everything that we're doing, benefits everyone, whether you're smaller organizations or larger organizations. And ultimately, if we bring more people into Drupal, that will benefit indirectly most organizations in the world. And I can give you one quick example of that. And I gave this example, I think, in one of my keynotes, but at Acquia, we had a product called Drupal Gardens, which was a SaaS version of Drupal. And we had somebody come to Drupal Gardens and sign up. And that ended up being NBC Universal. And so they signed up. It was one person spending, I don't know, a couple $100 a year on Drupal Gardens. And today, so many of NBC's websites run on Drupal, and they're spending millions and millions of dollars on Drupal every year. So it's a great example of how being accessible to a lot of different people, can be like an entry point that leads to, an organization adopting Drupal in a big way, in a way that benefits a lot of agencies, because over the years they've been a heavy Drupal user for 10 years. Over the years, they've worked with a lot of digital agencies around the world to manage all of these websites. So I think you should think about sort of that indirect benefit, even though, anyway.
I appreciate that. What I hear you saying, and what I really appreciate you articulating, is we've done this before. It's just a different challenge. I remember at the beginning, trying to get Drupal adopted was more of, it's a tool, and because we didn't know how big it could be or what it could do, it was, we had to create prototypes, we had to do these demos, we had to show like examples, and then the bigger organizations that we were selling to at agencies had to, well, now, like you said, Drupal's been around for 20 plus years. It's a new, different challenge. We dominate at the enterprise level, but at the beginning, those steps there's still too many steps. So how do we go down market? So I really appreciate you articulating that. And that's sort of transition to the next topic. So at DrupalCon Atlanta, you mentioned sort of the Lego metaphor.
Yeah.
And I had a bunch of people I was talking to come up to me. And so I just want to get clarification. So one of the, if you didn't see the video or didn't see his keynote talk, he talked about how the metaphor of Lego the company, and how at some point, Drupal was sort of the original building blocks, the square bricks, and then you kind of move into kits and things of that nature, Star Wars, etc., and then this marketplace idea where you can go into a toy aisle and you see all the different Lego kits, and then he provided this graph that showed, Lego grew. And one of the things that popped up at Con, and people that keep asking me is, okay, yeah, Dries showed this giant, profit graph. Who is the Lego company in that example? Yeah. So I want to give you an opportunity to kind of explain that a little bit more and kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, funny. Who has not seen the Dries notes? All right, so a few people. Okay, actually, maybe 20 people. I think you summarized it well, though. But yeah, I showed like this profit graph. It basically, when Lego switched from selling individual Lego pieces, which are modules in our world, to selling these kits and then bigger kits, really, the company started to take off, right? And it's interesting because it was a little bit counterintuitive. Like people would say, well, don't these kits limit creativity? But actually, it accelerated creativity. Anyhow, to answer your question, like when I showed that graph, it wasn't about profits. I mean, that's how Lego measures their success. But that's not how we measure our success in the Drupal project, right? We would measure adoption or growth, not in dollars, but in, let's say, websites or those kinds of people joining our community. So the analogy, I think, was pretty good with Lego, but it wasn't perfect because obviously we're not a commercial company in Drupal, and so we don't really measure profits. But what I measure is, yeah, as I said, the growth of the community, the number of contributions, the number of websites using Drupal, those kinds of things. And again, what we're trying to do is to grow these things, not necessarily profits. But if we do grow these things, I think a lot of the companies in the room should grow their profits as well.
Right, right. And that kind of goes
Which
back
is good.
to your maker-taker thing of going back into if you are benefiting from all this work, things of that nature, this growth, how do you sort of bring that back in?
That's right.
Yeah, do you want to go a little bit deeper on that? I mean, I think we talked about it earlier, and I know you've made a blog post on it. One of the things that I think that is also sort of amongst the people who come up to me in the community and talk to me is where the line kind of rubs up against between, and I'm just going to speak because I'm an American, right? The sort of ultra capitalism of the country we live in, you know, venture capital fund, money is everywhere, things change, and these open source, very, like you said, you know, open, inclusive ideas, and who gets to decide where things are going. Maker taker sort of feels like that sort of part of it. People can, you know, benefit from a group effort and then not kind of give back. I'm curious just sort of your thoughts on the juxtaposition of both those things, mainly because you're in a very unique position of having created an open source framework. Like you said, the community grew, but you also created a company that is highly successful. You know, you live in America, you're from Europe. Just want to kind of pick your thoughts on that juxtaposition, because it's something, especially nowadays, I think a lot of people are thinking about in the tech industry. Just love to hear your thoughts on how you balance and how you think about those two competing forces sometimes, and they feel like competing, or maybe you see it a little bit differently.
Yeah, wow. So a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
Trying to think where to start. Let's start with the VC topic, maybe.
Yeah.
So venture capital. So I raised money to start Acquia, right? If you don't know, raised about $180 million, or a little bit more, over all the years of doing Acquia. And people are always afraid of VCs, and they have a bad reputation often. But I can tell you that it has been very good for Drupal, whether you believe that or not. But in Acquia's case, a couple of things maybe that are interesting facts. But when we started the company, the first employee that we hired was Gabor. How many people know Gabor? Yeah, a lot of people. So Gabor has been at Acquia for almost 18 years. And from day one, before we hired any other employee, we told Gabor, your job is to contribute to Drupal as much as you can. And so Gabor has been contributing to Drupal for almost 18 years. You know, if you think about that, that's a multi-million-dollar gift to the community. And that's just Gabor. Over time, as we've grown Acquia, we've actually added more and more people to the DAT team, which is a Drupal acceleration team internally. And so I think now we're 20 to 30 people full-time contributing to Drupal, you know? And so VC money has been good for Drupal, I think. Now, there's risks that come with that as well, and we can talk about those risks as well. And I think also a lot of things happened because of Acquia that have benefited all of us, like the fact that White House back in the day, 2009, under President Obama switched to Drupal. I think that was very good for Drupal as a whole,
yeah.
you know, and that would not have happened without an Acquia.
The FedRAMP stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Was, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
White House ended up switching to Drupal,
yeah,
basically, and contributing to Drupal too. And I mean, every agency in the world used that example to convince other customers to switch to Drupal, and that's a great indirect benefit, you know. And so I think overall, as I mentioned in the very beginning, I started Acquia with the goal to grow Drupal, and I think we have been very true to that our word. You know, over the years we've consistently contributed every year and more and more. And actually, right now, to give you an example, like we're the main contributors to Experience Builder. We probably have almost 20 people or something working on Experience Builder, and like some of them are right here. And I think that benefits everyone. And sometimes people feel like that is a risk, and it is a risk because people fear like, what happens when Acquia disappears, right? Just to be direct about it. People worry like we're venture backed or PE owned, and at some point maybe our investors want to sell Acquia, and what does that mean for Drupal? It's a great question. And I don't know the answer, to be honest. Like I'm at Acquia, I will be promoting Drupal. I will hold the line, so to speak. I will push for more and more contribution as we grow. But it's also not fully in my control. So that is a risk. But the solution, I think, is to encourage or gently push other large organizations to contribute to Drupal more. Because then when Acquia, let's say Acquia stops contributing, which, by the way, we have zero plans to stop contributing, right? Just want to be very clear. I'm speaking very hypothetically. Like,
Right.
there's not been a
It's a
single
community conversation. We're just
just recorded on YouTube.
Exactly.
But like I can say in all honesty, like at the board level, at the executive level, we have zero conversations, about stopping our contributions to Drupal. Now, who knows what happens 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I don't know. I'm also want to be very transparent about that, right? But in the worst case scenario, if we stop contributing to Drupal, which again, we have no plans to, then it's really key that we have many other large organizations contributing to Drupal. And so our job is to encourage other large organizations that aren't contributing or aren't contributing as much to contribute more, because that's how we are more resilient and how we become more sustainable and how we can accelerate Drupal. So
yeah, I appreciate that. And I think what I'm hearing, and we can go a little bit deeper on it because we do have at least another 15, 20 minutes, is like you said, to speak bluntly on it, right? In order for Drupal to be successful with the community, right, we have to be employed. And most people are employed by large organizations, and those organizations have to prioritize, right, the importance of those folks contributing back to the framework. So I want to focus more on the solutions part. The model that Acquia currently is, which is, okay, it's a company, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it's a company that primarily does hosting. That's sort of a separate model, and the profits or the revenue from that model is invested into people who have the jobs to contribute back into Drupal. So that's sort of one model where there's a company that does a thing. The tools that they use are open source, and so they dedicate people and resources to helping contribute those tools. I'm curious what other models you think could work, maybe for smaller organizations, for individuals. Do you feel like that the Acquia model of, to make sure we're sustainable, you would encourage more developers to try to start companies, to try to start things with Drupal, so then that way they go VC and they sort of repeat the model of that's how you invest back? I'm just kind of curious from a business model perspective, revenue model to support the contribution, where you're sort of leaning and if it's repeatable.
That's the basic idea. By the way, first of all, I recognize that not all organizations are in a position where they can contribute. First, and like I don't expect everybody to contribute. You don't have to contribute, right? But if you can, and many organizations are profitable and can make a contribution, and then we're obviously inviting you, encouraging you to contribute. So I do think the Acquia model is repeatable, because that's exactly what we do. Like, we make money, and some of that money goes back to Drupal, and it's deep in our DNA. Like, we were born out of open source. We were born out of Drupal with the desire to contribute, because we believe fundamentally that in order for Drupal to succeed, we need to, help maintain it. We need to help make it better too. And we do that in a way because we believe in open source, but there's also a selfish aspect to it. Like, we want to, I would love for Acquia to be around for many, many years. And that means we have to keep Drupal highly relevant in the market, So yes, I do believe that profitable companies are able or should be able to contribute back. And I think often it's more of a cultural thing or a willingness thing, or actually making the decision to do it. A lot of companies are tempted to maybe invest more in things that are more directly profitable to them, versus
short-term thinking. Yeah.
We basically as an executive at a profitable company, you can decide to, if you have $100 to invest, how are you going to invest it? You could invest it in marketing your own company. You could invest it in building a proprietary product that you can sell, or you can choose to invest it in an open source contribution. And the open source contribution isn't necessarily the logical choice for most people. It's not. And so a lot of what we need to do is educate them.
Right.
Like, why would you want to contribute to open source? And we know in this room there's a lot of benefits. Like it helps with the longevity of the project. It helps you retain talent, attract talent. It helps with your credibility, but still, it's not obvious to most people in the business world. And so that's a thing that we need to continue to educate people on. And so we're trying to do this also with the maker-taker thing. So like we asked ourselves, what can we do to provide benefits to those that contribute, because now it becomes more compelling to contribute. Right. And so we have this notion of people come to Drupal.org and to Drupal events, and a lot of the visitors are leads, potential people that you can sell to. And so then the logical question to ask is like, why would we send leads to those that don't contribute at all? Like, aren't we better off sending all the leads to the organizations that contribute?
Almost like creating an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think of it as a dividend.
Okay.
Right? So like you give $100 to a Drupal end user, a customer, let's say. Like you could either give it to an agency that gives $0 back to us, or you can give it to an agency that might give us $2 or $3 back, meaning in terms of contribution time. Right? Not actual dollars, but. And so if you think about it that way, like, why wouldn't we send all of the users, all of the people interested in Drupal to those organizations that are going to give us something back in volunteer contributions or in marketing, whatever it is, right? Doesn't have to be just code contributions. And that's a little bit the idea of the makers takers. And that's also what we've now been implementing more and more in the Drupal Association with our certified partners. So we used to have this long list of all of the people in the world that did Drupal services. And everybody could add themselves to this long list. That was our old marketplace. And one of the things that we've done is we've removed all those that never contributed. We said, it's fine, you can still using Drupal, you can still sell Drupal to your customers, but if you're never contributing to Drupal, why would we keep you on our website? But rather send all of the people to those that do contribute. And obviously we've done this very carefully. And we also understand that not everybody can contribute from day one. So there's a lot of sort of leeway or flexibility into that I'm not properly explaining here, just to be clear, kind of simplifying it. But it's important to know that we have to do these things with understanding and empathy and caution. But that's the general principle. Like, we're best off promoting the makers of Drupal, because that is going to lead to more contribution, which is going to lead to more innovation. So it's a new model, and it's actually, believe it or not, something that we are actually spearheading. Like, the Drupal invented this idea, and a lot of open source communities are now looking at us again. Because over the years, they've looked at us for a lot of things. Like, how can we adopt that model, right? Because it might not work, but it might be a key component to making Drupal more sustainable. If we can create this loop, this feedback loop, like you make money with Drupal, you give back to Drupal, we promote you, it could really potentially help us make Drupal sustainable. And personally, I'm very passionate about this. I don't have all the answers, and we're on this journey of figuring it out. But I honestly feel like open source has won from a technical point of view. Like, most organizations in the world, they're quite comfortable today adopting open source.
Right, Linux, Python, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly, and that wasn't the case 24 years ago
when
I started Drupal. That was very different.
Yeah.
But open source hasn't won yet in terms of the business model and the sustainability model. And one of the biggest unlocks in the world is, can we make open source sustainable and self-sustaining? Imagine if we could do that. If we could do that, every software company in the world could potentially become an open source company. Because the reality today is there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of software companies, and a tiny little fraction of them are actually proper open source software companies. You can probably count them on a few hands.
Right.
But imagine a world where every software company can become an open source software company. I mean, that would be amazing.
Absolutely.
And so I think we're testing different things in Drupal now with makers takers that could potentially lead to this world. And I actually think it could be even bigger than that, because I think we can solve other problems in the world, bigger problems in the world, maybe around the sustainability of the world itself, if we can get different stakeholders to collaborate, because that's the beauty of open source. Like, we're really good at having many different stakeholders, like all of you in this room, all of your different organizations, to collaborate. So the problem we're kind of solving in a way is a multi-stakeholder, multi-collaboration problem.
Yeah.
If you think about some of the biggest problems in the world, this might be a little political, I don't know, but like climate change. Like, how do you solve climate change? Well, it's like actually one of the biggest multi-stakeholder problems in the world. You can only solve it
When
if you can
everyone
get
is, yeah,
a bunch of countries to collaborate, if you can get media to collaborate, politicians, if you can get academics.
yeah,
We need all of these problems to collaborate. And in open source, we figured out ways to collaborate that the rest of the world hasn't. And if we can tie this with sort of makers, takers benefits and these kinds of things, I think there's something there. Not easy,
right.
and we have a lot to figure out, but I don't know. I feel
Yeah.
like we're at the beginning of a journey to maybe solve the open source business model and sustainability problem, and then hopefully others can learn from that to solve other problems, and we can also continue to learn from others as well.
Yeah, and I can definitely personally attest to that. I mean, the parallel that I saw with open source and, like you said, this sort of collaboration problem was 12, 13, 15 years ago when we were having conversations about diversity, whether it was gender diversity, whether it's racial diversity, just even taking the concepts of, you know, lots of different people contributing. It's like, okay, this is literally the value. And so those I can definitely attest to just the concepts being able to be applicable to other things. As we wrap up here, I want to kind of go a little bit further down on that piece of sustainability piece. Maybe talk a little bit about where you see the Drupal Association being a big key of that, and then maybe talk a little bit about within the Drupal Association. So we talked about agency owners. I apologize, I'm biased. I wanted to make sure he talked about that because I'm an agency owner, but I also want to talk about individual contributors, folks who work at different places, work at universities, work at libraries, work at nonprofits. How do you see the Drupal Association specifically in this vision, and how do you see individuals particularly in this vision for this collaboration problem that we're trying to solve?
Yeah, actually, I'll answer that question, but before I do, let me say one more thing that will lead to an answer, if that's okay. So I wrote this blog post, Makers and Takers. I forgot the exact title. How many of you have read it? All right, quite a few people. If you haven't read it, go read it. It's called Makers, Takers, Sustaining Open Source or something. I don't know. But I actually read it after I read a book. And I mean, I read a lot of research on the topic of sustainability, and I'll come back to your answer. But one of the most profound things I read was a book written by Ostrom. And she was an economist. She won a Nobel Prize for economy. And she dedicated her whole professional career on looking into the sustainability of communities, but not open source communities, not software communities. And she actually studied communities that have been around for hundreds of years, believe it or not. And so I saw it and I'm like, that's interesting. Like, because I want Drupal to be around for hundreds of years, right? And I want open source to be around for hundreds of years. And so she studied all of these communities across the world. Communities in Japan that were living of the forests, if you will. Communities in Spain that shared like irrigation systems. And she asked these questions like, how is this possible that these communities can like share these resources effectively for hundreds of years without depleting the forest or without depleting the irrigation systems? And how are they governed? And if you read one book this year, I would encourage you to read this book. But she basically, after years and years of research, she wrote a book. I forgot the title of the book right now, but she basically establishes 7 design principles of what it requires for a community to be sustainable for, hundreds of years. And it's really interesting because when I read the book, I kept thinking about Drupal and open source and some things we do well and other things we don't do well. And it's a bit controversial because I won't go in all of the 7 design principles, but one of the principles, this is the controversial one, I think, is you need to, a couple of the principles. One is you need a policing kind of function, an oversight function to see who actually uses resources and how much, and are they contributing their fair share back to the system.
Monitoring, okay.
Monitoring, yes, that's the word. It's a better word. And so I think part of the role of the Drupal Association is monitoring. And so the credit system is about monitoring who's contributing, who's not contributing, right? And then the second thing she said, or one of the other principle was you need some kind of punishment.
Interesting.
If
Okay.
somebody is abusing the resource, is taking more from the resource, and is not helping with the maintenance of the resource, you need to deal with this. Like you can't just let that happen, because if you let it happen, that's when these communities
Incentivize
die.
is the wrong thing. Yep.
Yeah, and that's obviously very interesting and difficult to apply to us in open source, because we've always believed like everybody can use Drupal as much as they want. You don't have to contribute anyway. So, but also that's where the credit system comes in, right? We're not really punishing anyone, but like we're trying to encourage people to become makers and help maintain our shared resource, Drupal, and we're trying to give them, benefits like visibility in the marketplace and those kinds of things. But it's a fascinating book, and if you're interested in kind of, macroeconomic systems and those kinds of things, like I think it's fascinating. There's so much that we can learn from all these other communities that have predated us for hundreds of years, and this book does a really good job. And if you read this book, there's like links to or references to other books and research. Like it's kind of a slippery slope in a good way to start reading it. But I do think, we're trying to apply some of the thinking, applying it to the open source concepts, because we want to stay true to open source. We don't necessarily want the open source police, We're testing things out that in a way that are compatible with our culture and our DNA. And so the credit system and the marketplace promotion are just examples of that. And the Drupal association has a key role to play in that. So in like one of the design principles is there's usually an organization or a body that has that function.
Got it.
So monitoring is one of them. Yeah. So the other part was the individuals.
Yeah. I'm just kind of curious where you're thinking they can make an impact on this collaborative, sustainable vision.
Yeah, I mean, I think individuals have always been super important for Drupal and will continue to be super important for Drupal. Like, I'm always amazed about the power of one. We talk a lot about the power of community and what we can do together as a community, and it's amazing. But I've also, at the same time, seen the power of one quite a bit in Drupal. Like one person, I've seen so many one individuals, I guess, make a huge difference in Drupal. Like somebody creating views, like as an example, right? And it's like, holy smokes, here we are, everybody depending on views. And it usually starts with one person. And so each of you can have a massive, massive impact. We can talk about the power of community all day, but we can also talk about the power of one. And some of the best innovations in Drupal, I mean, most of the best innovations in Drupal didn't come from the top. And it didn't come from me, they didn't come from other people in key leadership roles. They came from people just scratching their itch, building something that they wanted, and it taking off. And that's actually the beauty of open source too. And so we do need to keep attracting those individuals. These are the individuals that have an idea, they have the ability to bring that idea to life.
Right.
They have the time, they have the talent, they have the energy, they have the vision, and great things can happen and continue to happen. I mean, like a recent example, maybe not everybody likes it, but when a few years ago, when OpenAI launched ChatGPT, Drupal was one of the first CMSs in the world, if not the first, to have an integration. It was incredible. Like within weeks or days, we had a ChatGPT integration in Drupal long before most other CMSs. And why? Well, it was one person, Kevin, that built a module and released it. And hundreds of other people have since used it. And then it evolved into like basically the whole Drupal AI initiative that we have today. That is the power of one. So each of you could start that kind of snowball. And in a way, that's a little bit my story too. I started Drupal just for myself. And like I never expected Drupal to be used by, hundreds of thousands of websites. And I never expected tens of thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people to make a living with Drupal. So we should never forget that, Yeah.
The book is called Governing the Commons.
Yeah, so to repeat that, the book is called Governing the Commons. Yeah, I have it linked also in my blog post. So if you find the blog post, you can find it that way. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was, like I said, I don't want to keep you off from your lunch. I know people are starting to fade, but I wanted to hopefully, give you a sense of, where your Dries' mind is. That was the purpose of these questions. I really want to focus on the community. I wanted the community to make sure they heard directly from him how he's thinking about sustainability. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the capitalism versus sort of the open source stuff. And like I said, a lot of people have asked me about that. So yeah, I just want to make sure we give appreciate Dries for spending some time with us and sharing his thoughts. And yeah, we can get you all to lunch. So thank you again. I appreciate it.
And I just want to say thank you as well. Like, I don't usually talk about these topics on stage, right? And I do appreciate that we kind of branched out. And I will say, like, these are sometimes difficult topics. There's tension in these topics. We're not always right about them. So I'm very much open to feedback, suggestions, ideas, and yeah, I would ask that you approach these topics with care because they're complex, and we're trying to figure things out. So with that, I want to say thank you as well. Thanks,
Thank you. Yeah.
Fredric. Yeah.
Absolutely.